well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Welcome to another edition of Bearing Arms, Cam and Company. My name is Cam Edwards. And, you know, it was literally just a matter of minutes after I finished Monday's Cam and Company and had the show uploading that we got the news about a federal judge in Camden, New Jersey, granting a temporary restraining order in a challenge against several of the provisions, not all of the provisions, of New Jersey's latest concealed carry laws. This is fantastic news for gun owners and Second Amendment advocates. As you can imagine, however, the gun prohibitionists in New Jersey, none too happy about the decision, although they are trying to put their own deceptive spin on things. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy issued a statement on Monday night saying, quote, the decision was an errant one, saying that the administration will work to fully reinstate the law. Quote, while we are pleased that most of our concealed carry law remains in effect, the statement said, we are disappointed that a right-wing federal judge without any serious justification has chosen to invalidate common sense restrictions around the right to carry a firearm in certain public spaces, virtually all public spaces. I mean, that's one of the provisions of the New Jersey, all private spaces. And yeah, the vast majority of publicly accessible places as well. Even private spaces like your own vehicle, off limits to concealed carry, right? You're supposed to unholster and unload your firearm before you get into your own car, because under the current concealed carry laws, you're not allowed to carry concealed in your own private vehicle, much less public transportation, right? There's nothing common sense about these laws, which is why Judge Renee Marie Bum found it so easy, I think, to grant the temporary restraining order that was requested by the plaintiffs here. As for the idea that there was no serious justification for this. Actually, if you read Judge Bum's opinion, it's the state of New Jersey that failed to provide documentation or historic evidence that the types of restrictions that they want to put in place have any sort of historical tradition or analog when it comes to our nation's tradition of respecting the right to keep and bear arms. So Monday afternoon, a couple hours after the decision came down, I had a chance to speak with Alan Gottlieb, founder of the Second Amendment Foundation, executive vice president of the Second Amendment Foundation, and one of that organization, by the way, one of the parties to this particular lawsuit. Wanted to get his reaction as well as pick his brain about what comes next. Take a look and a listen. Alan, thank you so much for coming on the program today. It is so good talking to you, and congratulations on this fantastic decision out of U.S. District Court in Camden, New Jersey.
It's a great victory. It's one of many I expect to see this year based on seeds we planted and suits we filed last year.
Absolutely. So correct me if I'm wrong, but you won on every count that you were asking today in terms of this temporary restraining order, correct?
Yeah, our temporary restraining order, we won on every count we asked the judge for. We tailored our complaint pretty narrowly up front because we wanted two things. We wanted to win on everything. And the second thing is we wanted a temporary restraining order issued quickly. So rather than file a kind of suit that would drag on in court for weeks or months, we filed something to get an immediate victory on. And now we can go back and expand it.
Yeah, I was going to say, this doesn't mean that you're not challenging the currently unchallenged provisions, or that you think that all of these things that you're not challenging in this initial lawsuit are constitutional. But, as Judge Bum talked about in her decision, with these particular sensitive places restrained, the plaintiffs in this case, these concealed carry holders, who we'll talk about a little bit in just a minute, they can now generally go about their daily business and their daily routine the same way that they could before these laws were in place, correct?
Exactly. And that's what's really important and why we had to move quickly, because people's rights were being totally denied.
So all of these plaintiffs, it's important to note, are current concealed carry holders in New Jersey, right? So these are not individuals who are making hypothetical arguments that, look, once I get my license, my rights will be restrained. These are people whose lives have changed, have been upended, because up until these new laws were in place, they could carry in all of these places. And only after the Supreme Court said, hey, you know what? This is a right of the people and not just a right of the few and far between. Then all of a sudden, instead of restricting who can carry, it became about restricting where people can carry.
Yeah, and as an example, that made it worse than what the law was before Bruin, that got struck down. I mean, if you had a permit to carry in New Jersey, you could have a loaded firearm in your vehicle, in your car while you're traveling. They made it so, okay, now you can have a permit. It's just not good anywhere, and we took rights away from you that you had before. Cam, it's really kind of interesting. I expected the gun prohibitionists to come up with new laws, but I figured their new laws would be like a step lower than what they had that got struck down.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, they doubled down and they passed laws that were more restrictive than what the Supreme Court struck down. And that made no sense because, with a 6-3 majority for gun rights right now on the high court, why are the gun prohibitionists being so stupid? You think they'd at least try to buy their time and wait until maybe the makeup of the court changed. Sometimes, we get lucky because the other side is not very smart.
Yeah, not very smart. Or, I mean, listen, maybe deeply committed to the idea of disarming people and leaving them, unable to protect and defend themselves. I mean, it could be stupidity, but it could be a combination of both, I suppose. But either way, Judge Bum made clear that these particular sensitive places are not likely to be upheld, when this case is finally decided. So let's go through some of these. We're talking about libraries, right?
Yeah, like libraries. And we've won on that in other states before, where states have just didn't pass a law, but libraries have said you can't have a gun in a library. We've sued over that, and we've won over that and said if you're licensed to carry concealed, you can definitely carry your firearm in a library. So there's been some previous case law that New Jersey ignored.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's true, throughout the judge's decision, as she talks about the sparsity of historic analogs, first of all, for what the state's trying to do, but then also, again, the lack of comparable or the lack of interest, I guess, in looking at what the previous case law has said. Bans on concealed carry in bars and restaurants that serve alcohol. Now, this doesn't mean the state of New Jersey can't bar you from drinking while you're carrying, but there is no real precedent in saying, hey, you as a lawful concealed carry holder can't go into a place where alcohol is being served.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure when the founding fathers visited, Williamsburg and had meetings about the revolution and setting up our new country, when they went into a tavern, I'm sure they were armed.
I'm sure that they were too. Let's see. Then places of public entertainment. Which I think when I was reading the transcript of the oral arguments, it sounded like one of the problems, and Judge Bump alluded to this later in her opinion too, says some of the language is really vague, right? So what constitutes a place of public entertainment and how broadly could that be defined?
Well, if you left it to New Jersey, they'd define it as the whole state. I mean, let's be honest about it. New Jersey may have been the first state to ratify the Bill of Rights, but it's obviously the last state to recognize it.
There you go. And then we get to a couple of big ones. New Jersey, like New York, had this de facto ban on concealed carry on private property. And so basically you had to ask the property owner, hey, is concealed carry allowed here? Or they had to post a sign saying concealed carry is allowed here, or you'd be violating the law if you set foot on their property. During oral arguments, again, Judge Bump raised this scenario where a UPS driver goes up the driveway to a house only to be confronted by the homeowner who says, you're not allowed to be here because you've got a gun. Would that individual be trespassing, even though they didn't know that that's what the homeowner's intent was? In the state of New Jersey, the Assistant Solicitor General said, yeah, absolutely, they'd be committing a crime. So I think Judge Bump's skepticism was there from the get-go on this particular provision, but I am really, really glad to see that she's not going to allow the state of New Jersey to basically turn common sense on its head, right? If something is a general right to carry in public, then the presumption should be that it's lawful and allowed. If you want to opt out as a property owner, you have that right, but you need to declare that you're opting out rather than expecting the general public to understand that, oh, no, they have to opt in, right, in order for you to carry.
Yeah, I go back, Heller, McDonald, and Bruin, the gun prohibition lobby should realize three strikes and you're out. And they should be repealing laws that are unconstitutional, not passing new ones that are blatantly unconstitutional.
Yeah, absolutely. That would apply to the ban, as you already talked about, on carrying in your private vehicle. And Alan, all of this is based on the idea that the argument that supposedly this is going to benefit the public. This is going to make people safer. How does it make someone safer to have to unholster and unload their firearm every time they get into their vehicle? Place it into a locked container or a secured container within their vehicle or in the trunk. How does alerting everybody around them to the fact that they have a firearm make them any safer? Or conversely, I no longer have my firearm because now I've locked it up. How does that make anybody safer, Alan?
Well, obviously it doesn't. And, again, this theory on that, if that could stand, why couldn't they say you have to have your gun locked and unloaded in your own home as well? If it's your own car, your own home. I mean, New Jersey would like to go as far with this as they can, and they're definitely gun prohibitionists. They'd like to make sure that nobody owns a firearm privately in the whole state of New Jersey. They've made that known for decades at this point, and we're not going to let them get away with it.
So we expect the state of New Jersey is going to appeal this temporary restraining order if they follow the New York playbook, and so far they largely have. Eventually, the Third Circuit would be the next stopping point here, and this is a court that has traditionally been fairly hostile to the right to keep arms. Current makeup, I believe, 7 Republican-appointed judges, 6 Democrat-appointed judges. So I think that I'd like to think that there's an opportunity that this case is actually going to get a fair hearing and a fair shake in the Third Circuit as well.
Well, we'd like to hope so, but eventually, what I would really like, Cam, is this case and other cases we filed on other issues around the country to get back to the Supreme Court, because I'd like it to be the law of the land where the Supreme Court flat out says these things are all infringements on people's individual right to keep and bear arms and cannot stand. So I'd like to see it settled once and for all at the highest level of our courts, and that's why we have similar suits like this filed in other circuits as well.
Listen, I'll be honest with you. I think it's going to be a long time before the Supreme Court says, all right, that's it. We've settled everything. And that's why we are in such a supercharged moment for the Second Amendment right now. It's why it's so important that we've got groups like Second Amendment Foundation, Firearms Policy Coalition, your state-based partners in this particular lawsuit and all around the country who are engaged in these fights, because these decisions will matter for decades to come, right? It's not just about us. It's about what rights our kids are going to have, our grandkids are going to have. And so, to that end, look, as you pointed out, the gun control advocates, they lost Teller, they lost McDonald, they've lost Bruin. I think they're going to lose this case as well, and a lot of others this year.
Oh, yeah.
Do you think they will ever get to the point where they say, fine, we will concentrate on actual gun safety. Fine, we'll fund, gun violence prevention groups but we won't push for new laws. We won't push for new infringements. We've learned our lesson. Do you think we ever get to that point? Or do we keep fighting until we get to the point where the Supreme Court says, that's it, we've settled every possible question that could come before us?
Well, it's probably a combination of all of those. But again, the only way we're able to pursue this and get these victories with the general public and people sending and donating money to the Second Amendment Foundation so we can afford this litigation to defend our gun rights. And luckily, up to this point, we have been able to obtain the funding. But we have close to 50 lawsuits right now going on across the country. I mean, 50 lawsuits to fund at one time is something I never would have imagined. So we can use all the help we can get. And if any of your listeners, watchers can go to SAF.org and make a donation or join, we'd be most appreciative right now, because obviously we're at the pinnacle of the battle and on the front line of this battle.
Yeah, and just a point on that, because I don't want people to think that this is a matter of quantity over quality. This is more litigation than you might have expected, but you're not taking, you're not throwing everything in the kitchen sink. You are closely looking at, okay, where should we be challenging? What should we be challenging? And I think this case is a perfect example.
Yes.
Of saying, okay, rather than challenging every word of this new law, what do we start with first?
Yes, we try to be very strategic in our legal actions and try to move the football down the field as quickly as we can, but as safely as we can at the same time.
Yeah, and that is critically important right now, because these decisions, good and bad, will resonate and will have a lasting impact. So, on that note, Alan, what are some of the other cases that we should be looking for? Because, again, there's so much going on and so many cases out there. What are some decisions that you think, maybe coming up in the next couple of weeks, or a couple of cases we may see some action on in the next couple of weeks?
Well, it's hard to say in the next couple of weeks, because the courts then slow things down a lot. But we've got litigation going on in Oregon over their magazine ban and their new licensing requirements. That's moving and hopefully will continue to move fast. We've got 15 cases in California that are all moving right now in one state alone. I guess there's 2 in Oregon, there's 3 in Washington, there's 3 or 4 in Illinois. We've got the Maryland assault weapons ban that we're challenging, moving up the ladder pretty quickly right now. That could happen sooner rather than later. We've got a Connecticut suit against their assault weapon ban. We've got New York sensitive places, 2 different suits, 2 different kinds of sensitive places challenges. We've got an so-called assault weapon ban suit in New York filed as well. We're all over the place, and of course we have a lot of federal litigation going on with the arm brace litigation as well, which is now with new definitions of what ATF thinks they can do with arm braces. We're first in line with that because we've already filed that suit over their last attempt. The case has stayed pending new final rules, and I think we're going to have some motion on that coming up very quickly with some legal actions we're adding to the plate with that one rather quickly and maybe even later this week.
All right. That is fantastic. And man, you rattled that off. You know what's going on. Alan Gottlieb, founder and executive vice president of the Second Amendment Foundation. Thank you as always for coming on the show. It is so good seeing you, and I know we'll be doing this again very soon. I appreciate Alan joining us on the program, and we're going to be following what's going on in New Jersey because we do anticipate that this case, the TRO, we anticipate is going to get appealed up to the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. Meanwhile, you've got the request for a preliminary injunction, and that's in just one lawsuit. There are multiple lawsuits that have been filed against the New Jersey laws. I will say that one of the Republicans who opposed this legislation in the State House, Senator Anthony Bucco, says that he hopes that the legislature will, quote, have to revisit one of the bad laws to fix the mess that they created. I don't think that's going to happen quite yet, unfortunately. I wish that it would. But when Senator Bucco says we knew the law was likely unconstitutional since it copied major portions of a New York law that's already suffered serious setbacks in federal court, despite all of our warnings, Governor Murphy and Trenton Democrats plowed ahead and enacted an obviously flawed proposal. Yeah, again, all of that's true. But that doesn't mean that they're going to go back and rewrite the law just because Judge Bum has granted a temporary restraining order. I think that most of these lawmakers likely knew. Well, I think they were entirely aware. I think all of them were aware that these laws were going to get challenged in court. I think most of them knew that a lot of these laws were not likely to stand. And yet they still proceeded in passing these laws because at the end of the day, they don't see your right to keep and bear arms as a civil right that is worth protecting. Not for you, not for your neighbor, maybe for their neighbor, and maybe for themselves. But again, if only certain people get to exercise that right, then it's not a right at all, is it? So they're fine with the privilege of concealed carry, as long as it's limited only to a few favored individuals, right? But when it becomes a right of the people, as the Supreme Court has instructed New Jersey that it is, even in the Garden State, well, that's again when we see these anti-gun politicians show their two colors, right? And all of a sudden now it's not about common sense legislation. Now it really is about turning a right into a privilege, something that Judge Bum called out in her opinion, granting that TRO on Monday. Now let's turn our attention to today's Armed Citizen story, our good deed of the day, and our recidivist report. We'll start there. Not a true recidivist case because this woman has not been in trouble before, but I bring this up because in Oregon, we just saw Measure 114 passed, right, with 50.7% of the vote. And the idea behind Measure 114, according to its backers, is that this would stop criminals from obtaining firearms. So when a criminal gets their hand on a gun through a straw purchase, we would expect that, in Oregon anyway, the criminal justice system is going to take that offense very seriously, right? Well, an Oregon woman has been sentenced for lying to a federal agent after buying a gun that her boyfriend, a convicted felon, is accused of using to kill two men. And as it turns out, the criminal justice system in Oregon didn't take this all that seriously, unfortunately. And this was a federal case, so this is not even state law. This is the Biden administration. This is the U.S. Attorney's Office. This is Merrick Garland's DOJ. According to Oregon Live, a woman named Amber Ann Silvas ended up buying a gun for her then boyfriend back in March of 2020, texting him as she was looking at pistols at a pawn shop. I asked him, how much do you want to spend? Her boyfriend, Savino de Santiago, responded $200. asking later, is it nice? She sent him a picture of a green Taurus 9mm handgun. He says, yeah, get the green one. So the next day she goes back to the store. She buys the gun, buys ammunition. About 10 days later, shortly before 2 a.m., investigators say DeSantiago shot and killed 2 people outside of the neighbor's home. In an initial interview with the ATF, Silvas claimed that she bought the gun for herself and said that she was actually texting her daughter while she was at the pawn shop. It turns out that was not the case. In about a half hour before the shooting, Silvas had actually recorded DeSantiago, the father of her 2 youngest kids, waking her and her kids up in the middle of the night while he was drunk. Video showed DeSantiago imploring Silvas to buy him more beer, and at one point he grabbed and loaded the Taurus pistol. She refused to buy him more beer that night. That's when DeSantiago threatened to use the gun to shoot at the neighbors. Again, this is about a half hour or so before he's accused of actually doing that. Silvas, according to the video, told him to put the gun down, told him not to shoot anybody, and threatened to call his mom before she then went back to bed. Again, a half hour later, shots rang out. DeSantiago is accused of the shootings. Silvas ended up pleading guilty in federal court in Eugene, Oregon, to making a false statement to a government agency. Assistant U.S. Attorney Jeffrey Sweet said she knew he was prohibited from possessing a pistol. Saw him handle it, heard him talk about getting in a gunfight and shooting his neighbor's house, and other than protest, she did nothing. These are not lies about a minor administrative matter. And then Silva's attorney says, well, look, my client was manipulated by DeSantiago. Not her fault. And she should be given probation so she can continue to care for her kids. She can continue to work at a sandwich shop in Roseburg, Oregon. He also argued that Silva's got the gun for her own protection, had it placed in the safe, but that DeSantiago found the keys to the safe in her purse and then got a hold of the gun. Now, she pled guilty, so I don't know that argument really matters, but apparently something, and it might well have been the defense attorney's argument, did sway U.S. District Judge Ann Aiken, because rather than sentencing Silvas to prison, she instead gave her 3 years probation. Yeah. Urging Silvas to learn to put her children first and to not get entangled with men who take advantage of her. Good advice, but it doesn't absolve her of committing the straw purchase, right? The National Shooting Sports Foundation has this campaign, don't lie for the other guy. If you do, you could get 10 years in prison. But that depends on prosecutors and judges actually delivering that sentence. What type of message does it send when a straw purchaser buys a gun for a convicted felon who then allegedly turns around and uses that to commit a couple of shootings, a week and a half later, right? Murders, not just shootings, by the way, but shootings in which people die. And she walks away with probation for that crime. Again, when she's eligible, now under sentencing guidelines, a first offense, not eligible for a 10-year prison sentence, but she was eligible for a couple of years behind bars. And it says she's getting 3 years probation. So I don't want to hear the Biden administration talk about how they're getting tough on gun crime. I don't want to hear Democrats in Oregon talk about, oh, look at these amazing gun control laws, when the laws that are on the books right now are not only not being fully enforced, but oftentimes they are administered with a slap on the wrist and a kiss on the cheek and a get out of here and we hope we don't see you later. That is a huge problem. And rather than attacking legal gun owners, peaceable gun owners, Americans who are trying to exercise their Second Amendment rights within the confines of the law, rather than going after those folks, the administration should be going after violent criminals. Instead, again, looks like they and federal judges far too willing to cut these individuals a break. Now, today's armed citizen story from New Jersey, believe it or not a case of a concealed carry holder, but an armed homeowner who fired a shot after a man broke into a home, apparently in order to steal a car inside the garage. Yeah, that's bold. When you're not even going after the cars on the street, but now you're trying to break into people's homes because you feel like it's a target-rich environment. This was Roseland, New Jersey. It was about 3 o'clock Monday morning. The mayor of Roseland, James Spango, says the suspect entered the home's mudroom after getting in through an unsecured garage window. Apparently was looking for a key fob in order to steal a BMW that was parked in the resident's garage. The homeowner heard noises, grabbed his handgun, ended up firing a shot at the intruder, apparently missed, but the suspect did jump out the same window that he came in through and then managed to get away in a vehicle waiting outside. Apparently had a driver waiting for him as well. The mayor says, quote, don't only lock your car, take your key fob, take your garage door opener out of your car. Don't program those garage door openers into your car. Lock the actual door from your garage into your house. All good advice. But, again, if somebody really wants to get inside your home, they can. I mean, it's just that simple, right? They can break a window. They can bust a lock. If they have the time and they have the motivation, odds are they can get in. What happens after they breach the sanctity of your home, however, is another question entirely. Will they be met with unarmed and defenseless residents, or will they be greeted by somebody who has the means and the motive to defend themselves and their family, as was the case in Roseland? According to authorities, the homeowner's firearm legally owned. Authorities are not filing charges because they say he was acting in self-defense. So miracles can happen even in the anti-gun garden state of New Jersey. We'll keep our eyes on this story if there are any more updates available. I don't know that there will be, but if there are, we'll let you know about it. And finally today, in the right place at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing, a good Samaritan in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, who stumbled on a house fire on his way to church on Sunday morning. Yeah, never made it to the pews, but he had a pretty good excuse. J.D. Hebert thought that running late to church was going to be the biggest issue on that Sunday morning. But then as he was a couple blocks away, he noticed smoke coming out of the eaves of basically a home that had been converted into apartments. Now, J.D. Hebert is also EMC certified, worked for the National Ski Patrol. He is currently the chaplain for the Pittsfield Police Department. That is basically a part-time volunteer position. His main job is as the facilities director for the URJ Eisner camp in Great Barrington. So he does have a little bit of experience in, not fighting fires, obviously, but in first aid, things of that nature. So as he was driving by and he saw the smoke, he thought, I got to stop. He said, I called my fiance on video chat and said, this is a problem. I'm not going to make it to church. Then he called 911. And alerted them to what was going on. He then put on a turnout coat, high visibility, went into the apartment building, started knocking on doors, and made sure everybody got out. The fire at that point had been contained to one room on the second floor of the building and was able to be extinguished, not only without loss of life, but without total loss of property, thanks to the fact that Hebert, again, was in the right place at the right time, willing and able to do the right thing. He says, by helping people, I make the world a better place. And that was certainly the case this Sunday morning, something that could have been a very serious, if not deadly incident. Turns out to have been largely an inconvenience for those residents because Mr. Hebert was there to knock on those doors and to get the residents outside. So, J.D. Hebert in Massachusetts, Pittsfield, Massachusetts, we thank you for your very good deed. Now, that is all the time we've got for you on this edition of Bearing Arms Cam & Company. I want to thank you for being a part of the program as always. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking about what's going on in Illinois with the ban on so-called assault weapons, likely to get through to Governor J.B. Pritzker's desk today or tomorrow morning. They're trying to ram it through in the lame duck session. We're going to talk with an Illinois gun owner and gun store owner about what has been going on in that state with the rush to impose an unconstitutional gun ban. Hope you'll tune in for that. Also, hope you'll check out bearingarms.com throughout the day. We are constantly updating the website with all the information you need to know about your right to keep and bear arms. If you like what you see, I'd also encourage you to become a VIP member. All you have to do, go to bearingarms.com/subscribe, use the promo code GUNRIGHTS, and you can get a significant savings on your VIP membership. Again, have a great rest of your Tuesday. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Until then, be well, be safe, and be free.